Chapter 1. The Wanted Poster. I was 5 minutes into my morning coffee when I noticed something unusual on the HOA community board. Right in the middle, printed in bold red letters, was a wanted poster for my dog. Violation, non-compliant dog, immediate removal required. Beneath it was a picture of Max, my 75-pound golden retriever, looking way too innocent for whatever crime he was being accused of. I blinked, certain this was a joke. But no, it wasn't. Karen Whitmore had struck again. Karen was the infamous HOA president of Oak Ridge Estates, ruling the neighborhood with an iron grip and a clipboard that never left her side. She was the kind of person who'd find you if your mailbox was an inch too tall, if your grass was a shade too brown, or if you parked your car facing the wrong way. And now, apparently, she had moved on to banning dogs. As I stared at the ridiculous notice, I heard the sharp click of heels against the pavement. I didn't even have to turn around to know who it was. "Morning, sir," Karen greeted, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "Have you seen the notice?" I nodded toward the poster. "Oh, I saw it. Nice touch with the immediate removal part. Very dystopian." Her eyes narrowed. "This is no joke." She jabbed a manicured finger toward Max, who was happily rolling in the grass, blissfully unaware that he was public enemy number one. "Your dog exceeds the HOA weight limit. 30 pounds is the maximum." I looked at Max. The same dog who got scared by butterflies, who cried when I sneezed too loudly, who had never done anything remotely threatening in his entire life. "Dangerous," I repeated. "You think he's dangerous?" Karen crossed her arms. "Rules are rules." I raised an eyebrow. "So what about Mr. Henderson's Great Dane? Or the Wilsons' German Shepherd? They're over 30 pounds. Karen's lips curled into a smug smile. "They were grandfathered in." I blinked. "Grandfathered in? So Max is just out of luck because he wasn't born at the right time." "You have 30 days to remove him," she said, her voice cold and final. "Failure to comply will result in escalating fines." And with that, she turned on her heel and strutted away, leaving me standing there, stunned and furious. I had dealt with my fair share of HOA nonsense before, but this was war. Chapter 2. Rallying the Troops. If Karen thought I was going to just roll over and let her kick my dog out, she was dead wrong. I had 30 days, and I intended to use every single one of them. Step 1. Find allies. I knew I wasn't the only one who had suffered under Karen's iron rule. If I wanted to win this battle, I needed backup. So that evening, I knocked on my neighbor Tom Garcia's door. Tom was the unofficial rebellion leader of Oak Ridge. He'd lived in the neighborhood for years and had a laundry list of grievances against Karen. If anyone would be willing to help, it was him. He opened the door with a beer in hand. "Let me guess, Karen got you too?" I held up the wanted poster. "Apparently, Max is a menace to society." Tom squinted at the picture, then burst out laughing. "That dog? I saw him run away from a squirrel last week. Tell that to Karen. She's giving me 30 days to remove him." Tom's expression darkened. "She's getting worse. Last week, she tried to find Mrs. Patel because her Christmas lights were still up in January. So what do we do?" I asked. Tom grinned, the kind of grin that said he had way too much experience messing with Karen. "We fight back, and I think I know exactly where to start." Chapter 3. The Petition. The next morning, Tom and I launched Operation Save Max. Our first step? A petition. If we could get enough signatures from other residents, we could force a community vote to overturn the ridiculous weight limit rule. We set up a folding table in front of the community center, complete with a giant sign, "Stop HOA Overreach. Let Max stay." By noon, we had a steady stream of supporters. People who had been fined for nonsense, people who hated Karen's leadership, and people who just really loved dogs. Within hours, we had nearly 50 signatures. And then, of course, Karen showed up. She stormed toward our table, her heels clicking like gunfire. "This is unauthorized solicitation," she barked. "You need permission to conduct neighborhood business." Tom leaned back in his chair, unfazed. "Oh, don't worry, Karen. We read the rulebook. Turns out, petitions are allowed as long as they don't disrupt the community. And judging by the support we've gotten, the only person who seems disrupted is you." Her nostrils flared. "This is ridiculous. The board will never approve this." I smirked. "Guess we'll find out soon enough." Karen shot us both a glare before storming off, her phone already in hand. No doubt she was plotting her next move. But it didn't matter. We had momentum, And we weren't stopping now. This was war. And we were just getting started. Chapter 4, The Counterattack. 2 days after our petition launch, Karen struck back. Hard. I woke up to a bright yellow violation notice taped to my front door. Unauthorized public disturbance, $200 fine issued. Below that is a threat. Repeat offenses may result in further penalties and legal action. I crumpled the paper in my fist. Oh, she's playing dirty. Tom showed up minutes later, holding an identical notice. Looks like we're officially on her hit list. Sarah Patel, the Christmas light rebel, marched over with her own fine in hand. She fined half the neighborhood overnight. This is retaliation. Then we fight back, I said, my mind already spinning. If she's playing dirty, we need to outmaneuver her. Chapter 5, The HOA Meeting Showdown. The next HOA meeting was packed. Word had spread fast, and the room buzzed with frustration. People who had been silent for years were finally ready to speak up. Karen sat at the head of the table, her clipboard resting like a sword of judgment. This meeting is to address recent violations and disturbances. Let's start with. I raised my hand. Actually, I'd like to propose an amendment to the HOA bylaws. Karen's smile faltered. That's not on the agenda. Tom stood. The community has a right to discuss changes. We have over 100 signatures calling for a vote. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Karen's eyes darted around the room, realizing she was losing control. Fine, she snapped. What's the proposal? I unfolded the paper. We move to eliminate the arbitrary pet weight rule and reduce the HOA president's executive power to issue fines without a majority board vote. Gasps filled the room. Karen's face turned red. You can't. Robert, a longtime resident and board member, cleared his throat. Actually, per HOA regulations, if a proposal meets the signature threshold, it must be voted on by the community. Karen's glare could have melted steel. All in favor? Robert asked. Hands shot up, more than half the room. Karen's grip tightened on her clipboard. This isn't over. But as the votes were tallied, one thing was clear. Her reign was crumbling. Chapter 6, Victory and Revenge. A week later, the official vote passed. The pet weight limit was abolished, and Karen's ability to single-handedly issue fines was revoked. She tried to fight it, but the majority had spoken. Her iron grip was gone. As a final act of defiance, Karen resigned from the HOA board, claiming she couldn't work with such disorder. A month later, her house went up for sale. On move-out day, I stood in my yard with Max as she loaded boxes into her car. Congratulations, she sneered. You ruined this community. I took a sip of my coffee. No, Karen. We saved it. She huffed, slammed her car door, and drove off without looking back. As neighbors gathered to celebrate, Tom patted my shoulder. We did it. I grinned, looking down at Max, who wagged his tail happily. Oak Ridge was finally free. Chapter 7, The Calm After the Storm. The weeks following Karen's departure felt surreal. Without her constant surveillance, the neighborhood transformed. Families started decorating their houses freely. Kids played outside without fear of receiving a violation notice, and conversations between neighbors became more relaxed, no longer tainted by paranoia. One Saturday morning, I was sitting on my porch, enjoying the rare peace, when Tom walked up with 2 cups of coffee. You miss her yet? He asked, smirking as he handed me a cup. I chuckled. Yeah, my mornings feel empty without a fresh fine taped to my door. Sarah joined us, sipping her own coffee. Well, don't get too comfortable. The HOA is already talking about electing a new president. Tom groaned. We just got rid of one dictator. Who's even running? Sarah leaned in. Actually, I was thinking about it. I raised an eyebrow. You. She nodded. Someone has to make sure we don't end up with another Karen. If we put the right people in charge, we can turn Oak Ridge into a real community again. Tom and I exchanged a look. You'd have our votes, I said. Tom grinned. And I'd be happy to run your smear campaign against any Karen wannabes. Sarah laughed. No need. I win fair and square. But if I do, I might need some help keeping things in check. I took a sip of coffee, watching Max chase a squirrel across the yard. For the first time since moving to Oak Ridge, I actually felt hopeful. Count me in, I said. Tom raised his cup. To a better Oak Ridge. We clinked our coffee cups together, sealing the next chapter of our neighborhood's history. Karen might have been gone, But Oak Ridge's story was just beginning. Chapter 8. The election battle begins. With Karen gone, the HOA election was the next battlefield. The announcement came in the form of an official letter left in each resident's mailbox. Oak Ridge HOA presidential election. Nominations open. Sarah's name was the first one submitted, but we weren't the only ones with a candidate. A new name appeared on the list, Margaret Langley. Margaret was Karen's right-hand enforcer, someone who had lurked in the background, quietly supporting every rule Karen put in place. And now, she wanted the top job. Tom groaned when he saw the name. Oh, come on. It's like cutting off one snake's head just to watch another grow back. Sarah stayed calm. We expected this. Karen's people wouldn't give up power that easily. I crossed my arms. So what's the plan? Sarah grinned. We run the best damn HOA campaign this neighborhood has ever seen. Chapter 9. The Smear Campaign, HOA Style. The next morning, the neighborhood was flooded with Margaret's campaign flyers. They were all the same, featuring a stage photo of her in front of her perfectly manicured lawn with the words, "Keep Oak Ridge Beautiful. Vote Margaret Langley for HOA president." Underneath, in fine print, were not-so-subtle digs at Sarah. Do we want Oak Ridge to turn into chaos? Do we want HOA rules to be disregarded? Do we want unregulated yards and reckless homeowners? Sarah read the flyer, unimpressed. Wow, she makes me sound like a menace to society. Tom scoffed. What's next? Sarah Patel, destroyer of property values. We weren't going to let Margaret control the narrative. By noon, we had counter-flyers up. A fairer, friendlier Oak Ridge. Vote Sarah Patel for HOA president. And beneath it, no more excessive fines. A community that works together, not against each other. Keeping rules reasonable and residents happy. Tom cracked his knuckles. Now let's make sure people actually read them. Chapter 10. The Debate Showdown. A week before the vote, the HOA hosted a candidate debate. It was the first time in Oak Ridge history that people actually showed up for an HOA event willingly. The room was packed, with neighbors eager to hear from both candidates. Margaret, dressed in an immaculate suit, took the podium first. As HOA president, I will continue the hard work of maintaining Oak Ridge's high standards. We need strong leadership to prevent unnecessary disruptions, and that's what I offer. Translation: more rules, more fines, and more Karen-style control. Then it was Sarah's turn. She stepped up to the mic with confidence. Oak Ridge should be a place where people feel at home, not like they're living under a dictatorship. I believe in rules, but they should serve the people, not control them. The crowd murmured in approval. Then came the audience questions. A resident raised his hand. Margaret, will you reinstate the pet weight rule if elected? Margaret hesitated for half a second. We must consider what's best for the neighborhood. Certain restrictions are necessary. There were groans from the crowd. Then the same question was asked to Sarah. Sarah didn't even hesitate. Absolutely not. That rule was ridiculous from the start. If I'm elected, it stays gone. A loud cheer erupted. Margaret's face tightened. She knew she was losing. Chapter 11. Election Day. The morning of the vote, Tom and I knocked on every door in Oak Ridge. We reminded people to cast their ballots, helping them understand that this was their chance to make a real change. Margaret's camp was doing the same, but the difference was clear. Their support was thin. That night, the votes were counted at the community center. The results were announced by Robert, the senior board member, with a final count of 168 to 94. Sarah Patel is the new HOA president of Oak Ridge Estates. The room exploded into cheers. Sarah, looking stunned but proud, took the podium. Thank you all. This is just the beginning. Let's make Oak Ridge a better place, together. Across the room, Margaret sat stiffly in her chair, glaring at us. She had lost. And just like that, Oak Ridge belonged to the people again. Chapter 12. A New Era. A month later, Oak Ridge felt different. Better. Sarah made good on her promises. She revised the HOA rules to eliminate arbitrary fines, allow reasonable home improvements, and ensure that the HOA board actually listened to the residents. Tom and I were unofficially appointed as HOA watchdogs, making sure no one tried to pull another Karen move behind the scenes. One afternoon, I sat on my porch, watching Max nap in the sun. Tom walked up, holding 2 sodas. So we did it. Oak Ridge is officially livable again. I smirked. Never thought I'd say this, but I actually like it here now. Sarah joined us, smiling. Good. Because I plan on keeping it this way. We clinked our sodas together, celebrating our victory. The war against Karen and her crew was over. And we won.